I'm Jennifer Gilmour, and I'm an author and advocate for women in abusive relationships. I want to get to the answers to the questions that many have from those that work in the domestic abuse sector, getting an inside feel of what it's really like in their job role and sharing it with all of you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Abuse Talk podcast. And this has got to be a first for me. And I mean, Anoushka was saying that she's a bit nervous about doing this. And I've said how it's just really relaxed. But actually, I'm a bit nervous because it's the first time that I've had the opportunity to speak to a detective constable and from the Met Police East Gangs engagement team. So welcome, Anoushka.
Thank you very much, Jen. Thank you for having me along. I'm very excited to be talking to you today.
No, well, to be honest, I am, and it's an area that I haven't really covered before, and I'm always trying to think of, what do we need to be talking about, and I know that you're so passionate about the work that you do. So today we're going to be talking about exploitation, and we're going to break it down, but the first thing I want to do is really get you, Anoushka, to tell us a bit about your journey in your career, because you've got a vast amount of experience, and I think it covers quite a lot. So can you just tell us a bit about your journey?
Yeah, of course. So I've been a police officer for nearly 19 years now. I know I don't look a day over 20. So I joined when I was 21, and in hindsight, when I look back, I think, goodness, I was so young at 21, and I was sent out there on the streets to try and help everyone and sort out people's problems. And I was just a child, really, at 21. I was based in East London, in Hackney. I don't know if anyone knows that area, but it was a bit of a scary area to work as a young girl. Chucked in at the deep end. I worked on response teams, so we take 999 calls, and from that I went to neighbourhood policing, and from that I decided to take the detective route, and I've been in CID for the last maybe 15, 16 years. Throughout the last 15, 16 years, I've worked mainly in investigations, so I've worked in all different aspects of policing, dealing with GBHs, assaults, burglaries, rape, sexual offences, and domestic abuse as well. Most recently, in the last 3 years, I've been working with gangs in East London and helping the families and young people that are affected by gangs.
Yeah, that sounds like so much experience, and you must. I can't even imagine it, to be honest, what police officers and the forces in general have to go through and what they have to see on a daily basis. And I do have a friend who used to be a police officer, and he couldn't do it anymore. It got to a certain point where he just felt like he was putting himself at risk. So I have to say, hats off to you for the work that you're doing, and especially in the area of which you are now. So I've looked up the word exploitation in the dictionary because I felt that it's important to sort of unravel it all. And for those who may not know the dictionary definition, I thought it's simple, but it's digest. So what I've got is, it says, number 1, the action or fact of treating someone unfairly in order to benefit from their work, and point 2 was the action of making use of and benefit from resources. And for me, especially obviously the point 1, it sounded quite familiar, the treating someone unfairly to get that benefit. And obviously I've been through an abusive relationship before, and I could see that actually that fit in with it. So what do you think in terms of that word and how it fits into different areas? Do you think I'm being silly, or do you think it does apply?
It 100% does apply. The main theme of exploitation is the using of somebody, and there is always a power imbalance when someone's exploiting another person. It doesn't just have to be an adult that's exploiting a child. It can be anyone who has power over that other person, be it because of their gender or their physical strength, their cognitive abilities, or money. There could be so many reasons why there is that power imbalance in a relationship, and where that exploitation takes some weight is where young people have a need for something, and that exploiter will find what that young person's need is. So they'll target that person specifically because that person might be seen as vulnerable, and they will see what that vulnerable person might need, whether it's housing or somewhere to feel safe or protection, and that exploiter will provide that. And that young person or that person is sort of in a debt bondage with that exploiter.
Yeah, so obviously you work in the community and with families, is that right? So how do you see the signs and symptoms then of somebody who's going to exploit that young person? What should we look out for?
So for me, as a parent as well, I've got two children myself. I've got a 12-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I've got a 12-year-old boy. And a lot of the people that we are working with predominantly are male. So we work with gangs, and gangs on the whole is a male-dominated world. But this doesn't mean it doesn't affect young girls as well. And young girls are used in different ways by gangs. And we can come and speak about that a bit later on if you would like. But certainly the signs that I would be concerned about if my child were being exploited would be if they're coming home with expensive items that can't be accounted for, trainers, phones, jewellery, or it could even be food. If that young person's got receipts, maybe receipts for food that you haven't paid for or given money for, or receipts for travel as well. If young people are coming home with injuries, they could be involved in gang violence as part of initiation, or they could be attacked by opposing gangs as well. And missing periods is a huge thing. If young people are going missing from school, even just for a few hours, they could be swept up in an exploiter's world of doing tasks for them during the day that you might not even realise is happening. There are so many things that we need to look at as parents. With girls in particular, they might not show as obviously that they're being exploited. It might be things like self-harm or a decline in their mental well-being. Boys might present with things like injuries, whereas girls would present with something maybe like STDs. There are so many different ways that children can show us that they are being exploited. It's our job as parents and professionals to keep an eye out for these symptoms.
Yeah, and I think, listening to even those things, you can apply that to, an abusive relationship. Those signs and symptoms seem quite familiar. And would you say there's an element of grooming? Is there a stage in that process to do with exploitation?
Absolutely. It's absolutely right what you said about the overlap between that being so similar to domestic abuse. A lot of young people become extremely secretive, or there's a lot of control over their mobile phone that they're using. Right. And that, again, is very present, isn't it, in domestic abuse situations. But yes, there are different stages to exploiting young people. And like I said before, specifically, exploiters will look for vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities could be anything. It could be that the child hasn't got a firm family home life, and that exploiter can see, the parents won't miss that child. I can have that one and use them to do my dirty work for me. Or it could be the child hasn't got much money, or there's risk of homelessness, or there's just household dysfunction, that exploiter will think, it's okay, you can come and be safe here with me. I will give you everything you need. So they'll target those young people specifically in order to get them to do their dirty work for them. And targeting could be anything from just observing children that might be hanging around maybe chicken shops but can't buy food. They can offer to buy food for them. That becomes the next stage, the experience stage. Oh, it's all right, come here, I'll buy your dinner for you, that's fine. But from that point that child accepts something from that exploiter, they then become indebted. They feel they ought to give something back to the exploiter as well. In the next stage, the experience stage, this is when gifts, rewards, praise, advice is given by the exploiter to the young person. They might offer them protection, They might test their skills to see if they're good at anything in particular, like breaking into cars or stealing cars or breaking into houses. They'll include them in their activities to make them feel like they're part of it.
Right.
At no point through this journey is that child in any control of their situation whatsoever. The exploiter has complete control, but the child won't recognise this as exploitation. They'll think, I'm one of them. They think I'm part of that gang, but they're not. They're just a minion to that gang to be used and disposed of. The next stage, there are 2 more stages. The next stage is the hooked stage, where that young person will feel that they're a gang member. They might even be given a street name. They might feel powerful, but this power isn't true. It's gifted to them by the exploiter and can be taken away at any time as well. And at this point, the young person is becoming hooked on the adrenaline of the situation, and they'll be engaging in sort of thrill-seeking behaviours and activities, criminal activities as well, and getting to a point where it's very difficult for them to leave and go back to their normal childhood that they had before, which then goes on to the trap stage. When young people are trapped in gangs, it's incredibly difficult for them to leave. Exploiters and elders in gangs might ask a young person or tell a young person, you need to take these drugs to that house across the city or across a couple of counties. You need to put these drugs into your anus, and they might do this by force. They might put the drugs into the child's body by force as well. Again, a child can't consent to this action. Whilst that child is en route to the location they've been sent to, the gang might set up a fake mugging, a fake robbery, where the child is robbed of those drugs, and then that further compounds the child being trapped in debt to that gang, and they have to work even more for that gang to pay off that debt, which they'll never pay off. It really does lead to a life for that child that is full of fear and isolation. So very much like domestic abuse. Another form of abuse.
I mean, you know, you just don't even think that would happen. And obviously you're based, you know, I'm in the north here. I just think I'm in a safe bubble. So let's, can we just cover like stereotypes on, you know, the word gangs? Because initially, even in media, we'd probably look at a gang and we have a visual idea of what they might do and what they look like. Is it, you know, how close are we to that, and how much is hidden and that we don't know about?
There's so much that is hidden. So we do see a degree of gang lifestyle and exploitation on our streets, and it could be the young vulnerable group of children that don't seem to have opportunities and have an aimlessness in the area that they live. They could be used as being sort of the drugs runners for the elders in the gangs. But the elders in the gangs you might not necessarily ever see or be aware of.
Right.
This problem is certainly not just for the cities. It's not just for London, Birmingham or Liverpool. This is a UK or global problem, and it can affect any child in any city. You will have gangs operating out of seaside towns. So you've heard of the term county lines. Mm-hmm. That basically refers to a single telephone number that is owned by a gang, and that telephone number will service drugs in another area. So imagine you had a branch in London, which you were drug dealing from, but there's so many drug dealers around, you need to expand your business, so you're going to have to get some other branches. So you get branches out in Southend or Grimsby or anywhere else throughout the UK, because you need to expand your business. There's too many drug dealers in the city, and there are not enough drug users. So they need to expand. So that drug line will service an area out of your home area. And they will send the children to those areas. And areas, they also might be asked to recruit local children. So you might have London children come to Grimsby or somewhere like that and recruit local children to carry on doing the business with them.
Yeah, and so would you say it's just drugs, or is there any other, you know, what is there any other acts that they're doing in terms of gangs?
So in a real nutshell, the business of gangs is drugs and money. So whether that's making money through illegal selling of vehicles or weapons, drugs is the big earner for them. So that seems to be the motivation for gangs. But with that gang lifestyle, that's when you get other things that happen around the periphery, such as violence. They need to secure their business, so they need to make sure that they have got complete ownership of areas, of the young people in that area, and they do that through fear and intimidation. They reiterate that with drill music videos that anyone can view on YouTube. It's unfortunately a lifestyle that our children can look at in an instant just by typing in drill music on YouTube. You'll find countless videos.
Yeah. And so if we've seen that maybe our child or someone we know, we've had a look at the signs or symptoms and we're a bit concerned about them, or maybe it is a community member because of the family background or whatever, what can actually be done to help that young person?
Okay, so it depends what sort of stage that young person is at. We would ideally like to prevent any of this from happening, so we like to do that with education, educate parents, educate teachers, educate communities. We need to bring up our children as a community. It's very difficult these days because communities aren't what they were maybe 50 years ago. Children need to attach, and years ago we would have had aunties, uncles, cousins, everyone living in one area, looking out for that child and being a moral sort of compass for that child. But unfortunately, sometimes we don't even have both parents for that child. Sometimes that child's in a care home out of area, and they're going to attach. They need to attach. It's a human need. It's an important need that we attach to other humans because that's part of our survival. So what the child is doing is not wrong, but it's what they think is best in that situation. But we know that it's negative for them. So yeah, education around parents and teachers is everything for me. Have a look out for those signs and symptoms. If you are worried about any of those signs and symptoms, it doesn't have to be all of them at all. Then I would speak to the teacher at the school. You can always speak to the police. We are very different these days with regards to when it comes to children being exploited by elders and gangs. We understand we don't want to criminalise children. We want to support them. We want to prevent them from being exploited. So I would really recommend speaking to, if you've got a local police officer, community officer, PCSOs, and your schools, to build up that community if you can, build up that support network. It's called an attachment village. We can give that child an attachment village so that wherever they turn, there's always someone there that's going to look out for them.
No, that sounds amazing. Really, I hadn't even thought about that kind of support available. And I think when you were saying about how they're looking for a particular type of person, I can see that again in domestic abuse, and I'm sort of looking at my own situation and thinking, I was at the other side of the country at university. I didn't have anyone around me apart from maybe some of my peers. I was kind of like perfect, really bait, really. And it's quite concerning, isn't it? And I think if we're educating young people through all these different kinds of situations, then they're going to be more well equipped. And I think for me, and I don't know if you feel like this, but in schools, I always think that why aren't we teaching maths in a way of how mortgages work, or credit cards, so we can work out percentages? Why aren't we being taught about the anatomy of our body, but for the important things that actually things go wrong when we're older and we don't even know that exist in our body? And I think it's just the same, isn't it, with things that can actually happen in life. I think we're moving on to that stage, aren't we? I think there was a time we may have cotton wooled everything. I don't think we do that as much as a society. But what could schools do? Do the police go into schools? Is there a program available?
So I myself, in my area, I deliver assemblies to years 5 and year 6, because that's a transition. I mean, it could even be younger in this area, to be honest. It's quite sad that some children that are getting groomed into gangs are, age 8. But yes, I go into primary schools, I deliver assemblies in a sort of fun, interactive way, because I don't want to scare children, and I also want them to see police as approachable. I don't want them to think that we're not there to help them as well. So the assemblies I give, yes, they're an education about gangs, what to look out for, how to keep themselves safe, but also to see that there's always someone there for them. There will always be someone, even if they don't feel like they've got people at home for them, there will always be someone else for them. And if it's a youth mentor or a doctor or your teacher or the police, there's always someone there for that child.
No, that's great. And but I have heard that you've written a program as well. Could you go into that?
Yeah, sure. So I co-wrote the Exploited Children and Gangs training program with Rockpool Life, who I know you work very, very closely with as well. I'm also a trainer and associate for Rockpool Life. I love the ethos behind all of their training programs to understand that trauma affects people so widely across the board, and how it can affect people, and it can affect the way that their life turns out and the roads that they travel. And actually that education from those training courses can really, really make differences, as you know, to people's futures and offer so much opportunity. The course is available UK-wide. It's a national programme. It details what exploitation is. It talks about gangs and why gangs operate. It goes into the detail of peer orientation and understanding attachment. And it also gives us really good tips as parents and professionals on what to do if our children are affected by gangs.
No, it's fantastic. I mean, I find it quite inspirational that you've taken this upon yourself, because I always feel that there's got to be somebody there that is passionate about something for it to happen. So I think, you know, it's so important to have somebody passionate in a certain area, and clearly because of your passion you make a difference to, you know, the area that you're working in. So I think that's so important to recognise. In fact, that's just reminded me, weren't you recognised for something just months ago, was it?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago I got a commendation for the work that I've done towards, well, for young people and their families in Barking and Dagenham, which is a part of East London. So yeah, I got a commendation for the parent groups that we were running over the last couple of years. They've been a great source of comfort for so many parents. So many parents had their eyes opened to what was happening. So yeah, it's great that this can now sort of go nationwide. It's getting recognised by police chiefs throughout the UK that actually it's promising practice to hold parent groups between police and parents to educate them about what's happening on the streets for their kids.
Well, it was clearly something that you deserved, so congratulations for that. Right, well, let's go on to the questions, because I think we've spoken about, you know, exploitation and the work that you have done. We've compared it a bit to domestic abuse and the signs and the symptoms, the familiarities. So let's go on to the questions that have been sent in. But first I'll start off with mine. So obviously people have strong feelings over the police, and in my opinion, I would say generally it kind of blanket covers the word police. Yeah. So do you find this is the case, and how do you deal with that, maybe the negative feelings towards the police in general?
It's something I've always been used to. So for my whole adult life, I've been used to having that negative feeling towards me as a police officer. I hope within minutes of people meeting me that they realise that I'm authentic and trusting, and I will help them. But I totally understand why people have got negative feelings towards the police. I understand that there's been historically huge issues over the years. I won't go into those now, but there's been huge issues over the years. I understand people might have a deep mistrust of the police for many, many different reasons. Whatever service you work for, whatever profession you're in, you aren't automatically granted authority for that person to automatically trust you. You have to earn that trust no matter what role you work in.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know if you can relate to this in any way, but for me, when I came out of an abusive relationship, I put my trust in, you know, the family court system and the police that, you know, things, you know, it'd be okay now, I would be heard. And I think that's difficult, isn't it? Because we don't know the systems. You just think, I don't know, I grew up in that era where if the police came driving by, to be honest, I think I still do, I go, act normal.
So do I.
So yeah, it's quite a bit of a journey, but I can see that there are people that will talk about the police in general as a whole thing. So once they've had a bad experience, that's it. It's just complete the whole thing. But for me, obviously doing what I do now, I'm sort of working alongside the domestic abuse sector and, you know, meeting people just like yourself, it's really not the case. I think it is dependent on who is a part of that maybe station, the police force in that area, the region. And again, you know, why I mentioned about, you know, your work and what you do and that passion. You obviously make a difference in your area. Can we have more of you in other areas, please? That's, you know, that's what I was kind of wanting to sort of go towards. Yeah, so that's just, you know, what I felt. But, right, let's get on. Why is any form of domestic abuse treated differently within the different police districts?
In what way? In what way is it dealt with differently?
So I think they have, I didn't want to name the police forces, obviously, to protect that, but they've said medically diagnosed severe mental abuse and severe sexual with a certain police force, and they had to save the paperwork and protect the profession, and they're just wondering why. And I think maybe it's the whole innocent until proven guilty, or the fact that there is a case of lack of evidence, but obviously that's a very personal thing to them.
Yeah, it is very personal. I'm sorry that someone's had a negative experience. I really am. There could be many different reasons why one case might be taken to court and one case isn't, and it's not necessarily because it's in a different police area, but it could be a lack of evidence on that part. It could be so many different variables. It could be the lawyer that's reviewing the case. There could be so many things that are out of our hands. Because we take the case to the lawyers, they make a decision on what they want to do with it, and then they take it to the court. And then again, that's a bit of detachment for us of ownership over that case, that we don't have every say in how that case is going to be dealt with. It's I appreciate it's really frustrating. People
so perhaps it's maybe not, it's not actually the police in general, it's the different people that you have to go to get things through the system. In a way, there's a process, isn't there? So maybe it's again what I said before, we're blanket covering it when we don't need to. It's about the specific areas within there. No, thank you for that. Somebody's asked, what should we do if we're concerned about a neighbour that's experienced, you know, that seems like they've got the experience of domestic abuse?
Okay, well, I would always recommend phoning the police, 100%. The police are the best people to be able to signpost that family towards the help that they need. You can call police anonymously. You don't have to give statements. You don't have to identify yourself. And if it's safe, if you feel safe to do so, then you reach out if you can to your neighbour and just perhaps be a friend for your neighbour if you can, to support them.
Thank you. And what advice would you give to childminders who might be aware of, you know, possible domestic abuse issues at home?
Again, I would report that straight away to the police. No waiting around. Children don't have a choice in any of the, not saying that adults have choices necessarily all the time, but children have absolutely no choice in keeping themselves safe. And we can be that person that offers them safety. If it is just a phone call to the police, then that can make huge differences in that child's life.
Okay, and somebody's asked, do the police need more support and resources from other parties to support their work? And if so, what?
So we work really closely with our partnership agencies. We work a lot with different charities, youth mentoring charities. We work with local councils. We work with the Youth Offending Service. And they've all got things that can help us out. So they've got mentors. So if, for example, I see a young person that is perhaps a little bit agitated, is looking for other things to do that is more criminal, then I can point them towards the direction of a youth mentor who can come in and be a positive adult in that young person's life. So it's not necessarily the job that I'm doing. I might not be the person that young person wants to speak to. I understand that. I'm a 40-year-old woman. That young boy might not want to speak to me, but I can certainly find him the support that would be appropriate for him.
No, that's great. And if anybody wanted to find out more about, your work in your area or maybe the gangs program, where would they go?
So if you want to find out about the UK-wide gangs program with Rockpool Life, have a look at Rockpool Life website on the courses, and all the details will be there in huge detail. If you want to find out a little bit about the work that I do locally, I am on Twitter. My handle's at @NOUSHD_. I think that's right. Jen, I'll type that on there or something. I'll find out what the Twitter handle is if you want to see what work I'm doing in my area. You can also follow the local pages, which is the MPS Twitter pages for Barking and Dagenham, Havering and Redbridge as well.
Well, thank you for that, and I will pop the information in the description, so if you're watching or listening you can find it with a click. So if you are looking for that, maybe help support, wanting to find out more about Anoushka's work or even the gangs program, just head over to the description and you'll be able to click through. And that leaves me to say a huge thank you for your time today. Obviously, it's so valuable, and it's just been a real pleasure, really, to sort of have you come onto #Abuse Talk and discuss the work that you do, and basically sort of pick at the word exploitation and look at what that means and actually how it can cover quite a lot of our lives, probably, not just in one area. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. What you do is you provide such a wonderful platform for people to be able to share their worries and concerns, and to share ideas with other people. Another way of connecting with people. So what you're doing for people's mental well-being is huge. So well done to you too.
Oh, thank you. And if you happen to be watching live now on YouTube, we're going to head over to Twitter and we're going to carry on the discussion about exploitation. So if you want to talk about what you've heard and maybe go further and think about how it's maybe applied to you, then we're going to discuss it over there. So just find us at #Abuse Talk. You can find us through there. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Anoushka.